All right, Sonny. It's been a couple of weeks. It's great to get a chance to see you again. Wanted to pick up on a topic that you and I have actually been discussing more and more offline than in previous discussions, and talk today a little bit about ESG. But before we get into what that acronym is and what all it involves, let's take a minute or two just to introduce ourselves real quick again to familiarize folks with who we are. So I'm Brian Grachowski. I work for Aquaculture UV. We're a equipment manufacturer that provides equipment into the food and beverage industry, primarily for disinfection equipment. My background is with microbiological detection and microbiological treatment for about the past 20 years. So some of that being in aquaculture, some being in other segments of food, beverage, pharmaceutical, et cetera. But introduce yourself, Sonny, if you don't mind, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this topic and see where it goes.
Yeah, so Brian, as you know, my name is Sunny, and for those of your viewers or friends who don't know, so I'm working in aquaculture for last 10 years, and I have competence in fish feed mainly and land-based fish farming. These are my main areas, and I am also having a master in fish feed manufacturing. And we wanted to talk about this ESG because I had recently got my diploma from Harvard, where we studied ESG and sustainability at length. So this is a good idea that we share this to the audience. Please go ahead.
That's good. And you can take that recent knowledge from Harvard and just give us the cliff notes of that in this short review, right? So everybody doesn't have to take the same course.
No, I try my best to keep some of the core to myself, but still I will try to give away as much as possible.
Yeah, of course. So ESG, so it's environmental, social, and governance. So can you define a little bit more? What does that mean for people that have probably heard the term but have not really expanded much on it, not sure how it's applicable to their business? Could you expand a little bit more about what ESG is in general, and then we'll talk more specifically about how it applies to aquaculture as we go on.
Yeah, so if you might have heard about the term corporate social responsibility, which was very popular term in last 20 years to until the last 10 years, until the corporate sustainability became the popular. So in easy words, you can say it's more about corporate sustainability, but it's less about philanthropy. It has less to do with the philanthropy because previously you see that companies have to have some social activities and activities which help in philanthropy, and they were setting apart certain amounts of their profits and pledging to the big causes. So this has more to do, ESG is a bit different because it has more to do with the business metrics, or less with philanthropy, and more that you actually get to understand your supply chains better, and then you know where you're lacking behind and what you need to improve, and what it has to do with environment, what it has to do with the people when it comes to social, and when it comes to regulations like governance. So this is in a nutshell. This is as much simplification way I can say this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. No, it's good definition for it. So I think especially a lot of people when they think about these sort of concepts, social responsibility, I think often it gets, associated with kind of a good tagline or a good image for a company to have, but really what those tangible results are sometimes are not, maybe sometimes not there, or not just frankly seen on what's going on behind the scenes. So we do a lot of work with Coca-Cola, for example, who you can see they publicize a lot of their efforts quite well, and you can see what some of their efforts are related to things like ESG and social responsibility. I know a lot of other companies, of course, kind of do the same thing. Can you expand maybe a little bit more on how ESG can be a profitable thing and not just so much about corporate image, for example? How do you see ESG tying into being a profitable and strategic part of a company?
Yeah, so when you are actually digging into these metrics, you might think that you are just coming up with a corporate sustainability report, or you are actually just coming up with more data from your business. But in reality, it's not just the data you are coming out with, it's actually the core understanding of your supply chains and where there needs to have some improvements. So this is like the way indirectly, it's more directly, I would say, rather than indirectly. So you get this lot of information which you wouldn't get otherwise. So, and this information, if you translate further on in your business strategy, or for example, you translate this further on to the changing trends, because you know this rise of Generation Z. This is also a big area right now, and this changing demographics. This has a lot to do with ESG. And actually, if you are careful enough and you are competent enough, so you go deep into those analyses, and then you find out what could be your advantage and how you can come up with a new business strategy to improve your operations and improve your profit. But at the same time, you keep the values of sustainability, like, for example, how it will help the planet overall, and how would you reduce your carbon emissions. For example, in many of the cases, for example, when you're talking about carbon emissions, so it's not just you're actually, if a ESG person is just saying you throw away all the electricity sources you have and then just install the solar panels. So it's not only about that. The thing is that it's not like the rhetoric that you are just following, that you are just installing the solar panels and suddenly you're becoming sustainable. No, it also has to do with your profitability, because in many cases, when you actually get to know about your energy consumption in your operations, and you change it and you supplement it with solar panels or other forms of energy. So in the end, there is a business case for that, and actually you're ending up saving the profits. So this is one of the examples. So you're trying to be more smart and you're trying to be more rational about your operations and overall business scene.
Yeah, and of course, there's obvious long-term impacts to that as well that are more profitable for the company as well. We see that a lot as well on the water side of the business. When you think about water costs, water scarcity issues, et cetera, and many plants taking the initiative to try to reduce overall water usage, look at opportunities to reuse water instead of discharge it as wastewater. We see that a lot, particularly in beverage breweries. There's a lot of big shifts there in that direction, which is ties right into the ESG concept.
Yeah, so it's water is extremely important, and in ESG world, it's called natural capital. So water is a natural capital, and it is scarce, and we need to also normally, when we analyze, so we analyze also at the same time what is your water consumption. So this is also a big criteria in this thing.
Yeah. So let me ask you this on the investing side, because we see more information about kind of ESG investing and people taking that, putting that on a higher portion of their criteria when they look at investing options. I know, for example, we're part of a group called Halma, which is based in the UK, who also does have a focus on ESG as part of their group of companies, of which, of course, ultraviolet disinfection is a big part of that. It's reducing chemical usage, and there's some obvious ties to ESG there. I know you're tied into the ESG investing side to some extent with some of your discussions. Can you talk a little bit more about what you hear as far as their drivers and some of the things that seem to be interesting them, and maybe even particularly to aquaculture?
So I will speak to the aquaculture in this example. So this is I wrote an article a few months ago related to the ESG and aquaculture. I will leave that in the description also. So there is a lot of wealth which is going to change hands in next few years, and because in this generational shift, because more and more wealth is going to go to the next generation, so they are really concerned about the environment and climate change issue. So this is one of the reasons why aquaculture is suddenly come in the mainstream because of that. Because as you know, the aquaculture have low FCR, so you can produce the fish in a very resource efficient way compared to the other animals. You can produce the proteins, I should say, rather. So you produce so this is one of the most efficient way of producing the proteins, which don't take too many resources, and you can use them in a very efficient way. So this is why aquaculture is getting this attention right now compared to the other protein sources. So this is, of course, one of the things. That's why the aquaculture is coming in. And on the other hand, if you see that there is a need for protein in the future, like there is like we still have this system of producing protein is a bit inefficient right now. If you see, there is a big gap. So this gap has to be filled by the more efficient way of producing proteins, and aquaculture is giving that option as well. So this is the overall reason why people are actually getting into this, and why the ESG investing community is also looking at the aquaculture to have that option to invest in.
Yeah. You mentioned FCR. So is that feed consumption ratio? Is that the correct term?
Yeah. So it's called feed conversion ratio. And feed, you have the ingredients, and then how efficiently the animal is using those ingredients to convert it into the flesh or the biomass. So this is how you analyze this aspect. So for an example, I can give you, for example, normally for the fish, you give it 1 kilo of the feed, and it can give you 1 kilogram of biomass back. But when it comes to chicken, so chicken takes from 1.7 kilo to 2 kilo of the feed, and it gives you 1 kilo of the biomass. So that's why it's so important.
Yeah, so you can see why, of course, investors might prefer to move in that direction as compared to other animal growth, for example. So yeah, I understand. So specific to aquaculture, I mean, to make that industry more attractive to ESG focused investors, what do you see as the key gaps that need to be addressed by the industry? I can see in general that it does seem to be more attractive than other areas, but where do you see areas where there could be some improvement to more align it with ESG concepts?
Yeah. So of course, despite with the good FCR and with the good metrics, the aquaculture, of course, have a lot to improve. There are, of course, these fish feed ingredients which are not really sustainable right now. Their availability is in question if we will have enough of them in next 5 years. So there is lots of things which needs to be improved. So this is related to the fish feed, and in general also you have a lot to improve when it comes to the practices at the farm level that we previously also discussed. So there are lots of room for improvement in that overall.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I think too, is there anything that you see specific to the land-based RAS operations that could be a big focus as far as making it more attractive to ESG Do you see anything specific to that?
Yeah, so it's in a way, this ROS related thing is a two-end sword. Actually, you can turn it into either way. So when it comes to the ROS projects, you can say not all of them qualify for the ESG investing. Some of them do, some of them don't. So it's a big question related to the land-based fish farming. But I generally see that they are a ROS farming community. They are actually taking advantage of this ESG rise of investing, and they are seeking the opportunities to enable them for ESG investing. But I wouldn't, of course, name some specific examples of certain companies, but in not all the ROS land-based fish farming projects are absolutely qualifying the ESG criteria.
Yeah. And I think just from what we hear from public and otherwise around here, I think the one concern we see pop up more often with the RAS projects is about wastewater discharge, for example, because oftentimes those are back into natural streams. So I think there's some concerns about potential organisms or pathogens that could go back into those natural bodies. So of course, there's more of a focus on ensuring that there's proper treatment, which of course there is, but there's high volumes of water coming from a lot of these larger projects going back in there. So there's some discussions about how to optimize that. Are there options to reuse some of the water at the discharge back into the front part of the process to minimize overall water consumption? So we see that as some of the drivers as well. And I think we'll continue to see that as the industry evolves.
Yeah, so there is a lot of improvement which needs to take place in the land-based fish farming segment to make it kind of as this showcase scenario for the ESG investing. But right now, not all the projects qualify for that. Maybe in theory, but in reality, it's big gaps still.
Yeah. Well, I think too, it's a tough balance because you see such a high rate of growth in this industry and expect that to continue, especially for the next couple of years. So companies want to turn a profit, and it's hard to dump, a lot more capital up front to focus on these sort of concepts, I'm sure. But I'm sure with a lot of companies, these are in the pipeline for future expansions. And once profitability is established, that these sort of ESG concepts, things like water reuse and other options will be a lot more prevalent, I'm sure. So
hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else? I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on the ESG today. I think we've covered a lot here in even just a short period of time. Any other just kind of final comments you have on that? Other people want to research ESG a little bit more or how it relates to aquaculture. Is there anything that you might suggest on where to research further or find some more information on it?
Yeah, of course, this is absolutely the new area in aquaculture. It's not much information available online, but there are, of course, now you can read some sustainability reports. For example, some of the big companies, they are publishing sustainability reports. So that is the good place to go to start with, I would say. And you and the audience can always contact me if they need some help.
Sure. Okay, good. All right. Well, good. Hey, I know it's been probably a couple months since we got together, so I appreciate having this discussion, learn a little bit more from you. And
thank you, Brian.
We'll do it again soon.
Always enjoy this this interaction with you, and thank you very much. And I didn't went in too much complicated things. I try to always simplify the information, and I hope I did that. And hopefully we will meet again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think if we get some comments on areas to expand, we can certainly dig into those details a bit more.
Yes.
So
yes.
Anyway. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you, Brian.
Bye-bye.